Hello, everyone. Welcome to Family Restoration and Healing Center's next session of COVID-19 coping tips. I'm Karen Thompson. I'm thrilled to have you here tonight for an exciting topic. The topic is addiction. We really want to talk about tips for prevention and tips for maintaining sobriety during a crisis. I have an outstanding guest with me tonight, Valerie Dawkins. Hi, Valerie.
Hello, Karen. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Let me introduce you, tell everyone a little bit about you. Valerie is a licensed professional counselor with Safe Harbor Christian Counseling. She also works in the emergency department of the MedStar Southern Maryland Hospital as a psych evaluator. And Valerie, my understanding is that your first position in the mental health field was as a family therapist with a residential drug treatment facility. Is that right?
Yes, Second Genesis.
Second Genesis, awesome. Well, we're here tonight to talk about addiction.
Yes.
Now, experts say people who are recovering from substance use can face serious relapse issues during the coronavirus stay-at-home orders. Valerie, they say that self-isolation and boredom can trigger a relapse into drug or alcohol use. What are some tips that you can give to help people maintain sobriety and prevent relapse during a crisis situation such as what we're in?
Sure. Well, first of all, yes, we are absolutely in a crisis, unlike what I imagine any of us have seen. And so typically when we're in a crisis, it triggers a certain response, a response to stress. And if individuals have resorted to the use of substances in the past, the natural inclination may be to revert back to those coping mechanisms. I will say, first of all, I know you mentioned substances. Addictions can take many forms.
Really?
Typically, we think about alcohol and drugs, obviously, but substances can also include food, of course, right. Shopping. It could take a number of forms in terms of an over-reliance on something to improve one's sense of wellness, or just managing emotional and mental discomfort.
Right.
So again, managing stress. And again, we're all going through it right now.
Yeah.
I will say, it's my opinion that those who are in the process of recovery, who have achieved some sobriety, may have a leg up on many individuals who have not really had to entertain in a deliberate way the idea that we're not in control. Because as human beings, we like the idea of being in control. We structure our day and we expect certain things to be. But when you face an addiction, you have to acknowledge that you're powerless, that there are things that are outside of your control. And so already having the tools to kind of work through that and to that process, those who are in sobriety, they have tools. It's just that, as you said, when you're in a place of isolation and boredom, it can trigger potential relapse. And right now, it's a forced isolation, right? Nobody's really chosen this. But if in the past you have isolated, it feels the same, and you can resort back to that. So some of the tips, like I said, those who are in the process of recovery, they kind of already have tools. The key is to lean in, to lean into the tools that you use to achieve sobriety. For instance, community. Community is so very important. Even in the midst of an isolated experience, we are all, just by virtue of what we're doing now, reaching out virtually to one another. And so they are online. If there are people that are in 12-step programs, there are online virtual meetings that are happening. Certainly family or friend connections, but the main thing is to be intentional about staying connected to community, to ward off the isolation and the boredom that can result from being alone. And in an overall sense, the serenity prayer. Accepting the things you can't change. Many of us, like I said, we're confronted with so many things we can't change right now. The courage to change the things that we can change. There are things that we can do right in the midst of our situation, and we can focus on those, but we have to have the wisdom to know the difference of in which category. And so accountability. is important. You know, when you are going through and trying to push through maladaptive patterns, someone that's going to hold you accountable to staying on course.
Mm-hmm.
For those that have achieved sobriety, many do have accountability partners. If not, to seek one out. Even those that aren't struggling,
Mm-hmm.
if they're trying to, adopt a physical regimen, physical fitness regimen. Hey, I need a buddy to help me, because it come naturally to me, right? I don't always feel like doing it. So having that accountability structure in place is also important. And speaking of exercise, practicing holistic wellness, understanding the mind-body connection, being able to release those natural endorphins by moving, getting natural vitamin D. We may not be able to go out socially the way we have, but hey, maybe you can sit out front of your home or take a walk down the block just to get some sunlight. And so, again, paying attention to the whole person is important. And then gratitude. Gratitude. Being mindful of the things that we do have instead of focusing on the glass being half empty.
You mentioned several things, including the fact that addiction can take many forms. As a pastoral counselor, people come to us for a number of different things, and the same type things that you were sharing just now also pertains to pornography addiction. As you said, eating addiction, internet addiction. It doesn't matter. It's when it interferes with your normal life, and it's something that you no longer can really control. Some of those tips are the same. Those were some excellent tools. You also mentioned that holistic approach, and Family Restoration and Healing Center's 360 Wholeness Program focuses on awareness and prevention, coping tips, resources for the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. We also focus on adults and children. So I want to focus for just a moment on our children and our teens. I have a question that had come into me. It said that the impacts of the pandemic could cause increased childhood stress and trauma, which could increase addiction risk. How can at-risk families and caring adults help minimize or prevent addiction risk for our youth? Prevention.
Excellent question, and very important, because when adults are dealing with their own stress, it can be difficult to be keyed into the impact that it's having on their children. They're just trying to keep the house afloat, job instability. And so all of the unknowns that hit us, they hit children, even in a more core way because of the safety and security needs that they have. And so absolutely, the risk is present. So how do we minimize the risk? How do we kind of ward off, the likelihood that children and teens will begin resorting to addictive behavior? It can be tricky. It can be challenging, for a number of reasons. First of all, there's just the awareness that the potential is there, which you're bringing to light, which, and it's great. And so one of the reasons it can be tricky is because developmentally, particularly in the teenage years, children are more prone to isolate. They'll go in their room, right? And just do their thing with their friends and this and that. And so being sensitive to if you're starting to see a little bit more isolation, they're not wanting to come out for dinner, or, being sensitive to changes in their mood or in their behavior patterns, the way, again, they move about the home or interact with family. Those things can be important. And so building in family time, even if it's simple, it doesn't have to be, over the top, because like I said, adults are dealing with, very important things in finding a new normal. But finding ways to check in, maybe,
Good.
How are you feeling? How's it going? What did you do today? Or finding ways to have structure in the day, and so that you can be more observant of the nuances of change, even while acknowledging, yes, kids do like their alone time, but when you can kind of see, okay, this is a little bit more than I'm used to seeing with him or her, and when we feel out of control, a lot of times the response is to become fixated on what we can control. So there may become an over-reliance on things that you just enjoyed, you know, initially. But now, again, you're kind of grabbing onto it, and it can lead into an addictive posturing where you said, you know, despite the negative consequences, you know, you're indulging in something, you know, beyond, and to that point, kids already on the internet. You mentioned internet addiction, right? They use video games, and so it's fun. But if you are in a time of stress, you can become over-reliant on it.
Yes.
And it's hard. And so maybe structuring the time that they're spending on devices, you know, and not giving it, you know, carte blanche access, because you can become addicted. And so it's just a heightened awareness of the changes in patterns and the ways that children are using things that may have been benign before, but because of the stress level, it can kind of cross that line into more problematic or compulsive behavior.
And am I right in saying that this is not a sign of weakness, but anyone can fall into some kind of an addiction and not even realize that they were addicted?
Yes. Social drinking has turned into problem drinking just in that way. It's innocent at first, but if you marry that with a stressor and some level of vulnerability, before you know it, you can cross a line, and, you know, where it's not in your control as much as it had been before.
Well, along those lines, when is it time to reach out for help? Addiction prevention or maintaining sobriety, when is it time to reach out for help?
Yeah, and so, that's a great point, and what we kind of were just talking about. When you start to feel like, or aware that, you know, you're relying on something perhaps more than you had been, and, you know, you're no longer really choosing it. You know, it's I'm saying it's choosing you, but it's like your go-to, despite the negative consequences.
Yes.
That might be happening.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah. Because normally we can self-monitor, like, okay, I'm eating a little bit too much, or, you know, I had a little bit too much. I need to scale back. I need to lay off. But when you find yourself unable to make that course correction or modify, you know, you may need additional support to do that. That is gone beyond what you can manage effectively. And or you may find that other people are starting to complain about your use. You may not be aware of it, but it's coming to the attention of people in your circle. Like, wait a minute, what isn't that? Haven't you already had? You know? And so they're starting to notice an increase in your usage.
So a flag is not only when you realize that you can't really, you're continuing into something even though there are negative consequences, but when what you're doing, others are noticing it.
Absolutely.
You start to get some feedback from other people. We should pay attention to those in our trusted circle. People in our trusted circle who are maybe trying to give us a warning, a heads up that there may be something a little out of control here, and it's time to reach out for help. So we shouldn't ignore those flags.
Right.
Go ahead.
Just one other, if you find that you start hiding your use, you know, you start kind of being a little bit more secretive because you don't want it to come to the attention of the people in your circle. You know,
it's time to reach out for help. And one of the places that Family Restoration and Healing Center will refer people to for help with addictive behaviors. We have a therapist, but right now our therapist is pretty full. So we've been referring to our partners at Safe Harbor Christian Counseling. And Safe Harbor offers telehealth counseling. They can be reached at 800-305-2089. That's Safe Harbor at 800-305-2089. You can also reach Family Restoration and Healing Center at www.360wholeness.org. That's www.360wholeness, WHOLENESS.org. And you can always go to the Contact Us page and email us just a note to say you want to talk to someone, and we can try and connect you to someone. We also have a resources page for you, COVID-19 tips, coping tips resource page that's available for you. Well, Valerie, did you have any closing thoughts before we close? This has been a wonderful conversation. I've really enjoyed these coping tips. You did a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you.
Yes.
Did you have any closing thoughts?
Just that I think we all should be kind to ourselves. You know, going through this is again unprecedented, and so managing your expectations even around how you respond, extending yourself a little bit more grace, even and with others, can also help reduce some of the stress and anxiety because people are feeling pressure from all sides.
I love that.
So being gentle with yourself through this.
With yourself and others, I agree. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Excellent job. Thank you again, Valerie. I've enjoyed this segment of COVID-19 coping tips. All right.
Yes, thank you so much.